I don't want you to panic, but it is looking like crypto mining is once again causing availability issues for computer parts, although so far at least, this time it hasn't affected gaming GPUs. This time it's hitting CPUs, and luckily the specific CPU it seems to be hitting is not one that people would pick as a top choice for gaming builds. Not that it's not a good gaming CPU, but it has a lot of cores and a lot of threads rather than 3D V-cache. In other words, like, it's not gonna affect your 7800X3D, it's the Ryzen 9 7950X, which is apparently able to turn up to $3 per day profit on the Cubic coin, which is mined on CPUs. And apparently, what makes a 7950X particularly useful for this is its large core count combined with low power consumption and AVX512 support. Which means that, this could affect the Ryzen 8000 series if we continue to get a lot of cores, AVX512 support, and good power efficiency. Looks like this was initially spotted by Megasize GPU on Twitter and then picked up by a variety of news outlets. I'm showing you the videocards.com article about it here. But again, other places are reporting on this as well. So the good news, I guess, for the gaming PC market at least, is that the particular CPU that seems to be interesting for this and having supply issues because of it isn't the top gaming CPU, but cryptocurrency kind of pricing has been surging again lately. I'm just always nervous about what that could do to the gaming PC community if we get caught up in another crypto boom. Because what does it do to prices? And speaking of prices on building PCs, you have to check out Jawa.gg. I'll have a link to them in the pinned comment and the video description. This is where gamers buy, build, and sell. And huge thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. And I can get you $10 off your first purchase if you use code OWEN10 when you follow that link. Now, again, this is where gamers buy, build, and sell, which means you can list your old hardware when you're gonna sell it to fund your upgrade, and you can also buy hardware here. They have a bunch of pre-built systems at a variety of price points that you should definitely check out, as well as you can search for individual components you're looking for, and oftentimes the used market has the best deals. If you don't want to list things and wait around for a buyer, they also offer an instant cash for your GPU program where you just tell them the GPU model and condition and get an instant offer. Takes all of the hassle out of the process. And if you're looking for kind of that one-on-one feedback and discussion about your PC builds, they have a massive Discord community, over 10,000 members last time I checked, where you can get recommendations from gaming experts on the builds and all of that. So definitely follow the link in the pinned comment and or video description. And again, use code OWEN10. I can get you $10 off that first purchase. And let's move on to some more news topics that are maybe both good and bad. We've got a whole bunch of articles coming out about the RTX 50 series. So a whole bunch of stuff about this. Let's go ahead and jump in. So basically what a lot of this is coming from is our favorite, it's hitting the time of year where Kopite 7 Kimi comes around. So if you've followed the channel for the last couple of years, you know that as new GPU generations are coming around, the leaks and rumors mill starts firing up, and Kopite 7 Kimi is one of the most prolific leakers of future hardware specs, as well as having one of the better track records for getting things correct, because anybody can say anything they want on Twitter, but if you actually get things right, more often than not, people are more likely to care, right? So what are we seeing? One tweet we're seeing is that GB203 is half of GB202, and then also talks about not sure if it would be a multi-chip package or anything like that. Probably not for GB202, kind of what they're saying. We're also getting some numbers regarding memory bit interfaces. Like, there was some back and forth on, the top end will be 512-bit, or maybe it's only 384-bit. And then also, all signs point to GDDR7 memory being used, but at what speeds and at what capacities. And it's looking like 28 gigabit per second speeds, But the capacities, so which is basically faster than what we've seen from GDR6 and GDR6X in the current models, current generations of GPUs, but certainly not up to the full speed that GDR7 can possibly hit in the future. But then also the capacities are looking like they'll likely be 2 gigabyte modules, basically, meaning that the capacities of VRAM would be the same on the same bit buses. So we're seeing a whole bunch of articles and, like I said, tweets on this. So if it's the 16 gigabit modules, like for density, then, like I said, that's going to give us the same capacities as we've been seeing before. So where does that actually put us on all of this as far as what do we know about the next generation of GPUs? And like I said, why do I think some of this is good and some of this is bad? Let me see. I think videocards.com had this chart is one that I'd like to talk about a little bit. So if you look at this, so GB202 compared to GB203, so this would be our next generation of NVIDIA GPU, gaming GPU dies. If you compare that to the current generation with the 40 series, AD102 and AD103, I want you to notice something. So there is a large jump from AD102 to AD103. And keep in mind that in the 40 series, the only gaming GPU on AD102, which is the top end, is the RTX 4090. And then you have to jump down to AD103 to get the 4080, the 4080 Super, the 4070 Ti Super, cards like that. And you notice there is a big jump in specs between those. But look at it for the next generation, again, assuming all the leaks and rumors and whatnot turn out to be true. It's even bigger. 96 times 2 is 192, meaning, in other words, this was that tweet about GB203 is half of GB202. So why I think this might be a bad thing and a good thing is that it means that GB202 is likely to be very impressive. And so if NVIDIA follows the same pattern they did with the 4000 series, it sounds like the 5090, if that's your GB202 GPU, and if it's the only GB202 gaming GPU, sounds like the 5090 could be a massively impressive product. But it also means that if they follow the pattern of the 80 class chip, like the 5080, being on GB203 rather than being a cut down GB202, like they did with the 4090 and the 4080 with AD102 and 103, then notice that AD103 is more than half of AD102. It's more than half, right? The bit bus is more than half, the SMs is more than half. So this could mean that there would be an even larger gap between the 5090 and the 5080 than there is between the 4090 and the 4080. And there's already a fairly large gap there. For example, the 3080 and the 3090 did not have a huge performance gap. You got most of the performance of a 3090 from a 3080. You don't get the 4080 and the 4090 have a much larger performance gap. And it's looking like we could see an even larger performance gap between the 5090 and the 5080. Again, if they follow the same pattern that we saw with how they choose to split this up. Because again, if they put a 5080 as a cut down GB202, that's totally different, right? But with half the memory bit bus and half the SMs on those dies, that's a bit concerning to me in that a lot of this generation its pricing and performance structure seems to have been designed, I'm talking about the 40 series, designed around upselling you to the more expensive model, whereas previous generations were more willing to give you most of the top-end performance for a much better price by just taking it down a step or two off the top end, right? So, I don't know, this is just giving me some bad feelings of maybe that being the case again. And now also, then, if we look at some other charts, these bit buses also then tell us the VRAM capacities that you would expect to fit. So again, if you're going with, and the memory bandwidth. So if you're going with the 2 gigabyte modules, which is what was kind of being expected here, It means that, you know, if GB202 is your 5090, it would be a 32 gigabyte card. If you went down to a 384-bit bus, you would get 24 gigabytes. But again, the more updated leak was claiming probably only a 256-bit bus on GB203. So if you only get the 256-bit bus, then GB203 would be a 16 gigabyte capacity. And again, as you kind of step it down here, as you go down to 205, if you're on 192-bit capacity, 192-bit capacity gets you down to a 12 gigabyte card, and the 128-bit cards would be, again, 8 gigabyte cards unless you go into clamshell mode and double it up to 16. So in other words, the VRAM capacities look like they would match the current generation, other than the 5090 probably going up to 32 instead of 24, assuming all of these rumors pan out. And we are still very far from launch, so it's totally possible this stuff would be wrong. But that's what we would be expecting so far. Now, even though the VRAM capacities for most of the lineup are probably going to be the same, if all of this pans out, as the 40 series, at least by bit bus, because you're using the same capacity modules, the bandwidth would be increased compared to the 40 series, because you'd be running higher speed memory. So even though you have the same capacity, you would have higher speeds, which does lead to larger bandwidth. So again, this is assuming the 28 gigabit per second speed is correct. So that's pretty much where we're at with 50 series rumors. Let's jump into some other more current generation stuff. So regarding pricing, so the RX 7700 XT from AMD launched with a $450 MSRP, which was only $50 less than the much better 7800 XT, which kind of left it in a no man's land as far as maybe it wasn't awful compared to the pricing at the time for NVIDIA offerings, but why wouldn't you spend the extra $50 to get the 7800 XT? Recently, AMD officially cut its price to, I think, $430. It was either $430 or $420. And then now we're actually seeing them available on the market as low as $399. If this card had just launched at $399, I think it would have been much better received. The only problem with the $399 price point is the RX 6800 non-XT from the previous generation offers about the same performance, but has 16 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 12. The 7700 XT has 12. So at least in the United States, I know this is not the case worldwide, but at least in the United States, you can still find 6800 non-XTs for about $380 to $390 brand new, which is the only problem with going with the 7700 XT at this price point. But at least at this price point, it's worth considering once the 6800 dries up, or maybe you're already in a region where it has. Now, speaking of other regional pricing, when NVIDIA's 40 Super Series cards launched, a lot of them were above MSRP in various markets, especially the 4080 Super. But we're seeing reports, this one's from WCCF Tech, but I believe they're getting their information from PC Games Hardware, which is a German language outlet, I believe, tracking pricing of the Super Series GPUs. And they're actually seeing models of all 40 Super cards available below MSRP at various retailers in Germany. So it's not every Super card is below MSRP, but some, at least one model of each Super card has been available below MSRP in that region. So interesting to see that moving down. Now, into some other kind of quicker, interesting stories. I'm seeing headlines of RTX 20 and GTX 16 Turing Series GPUs getting unofficial resizable bar support. Now, resizable bar is a feature that can be enabled as long as your GPU supports it, your motherboard supports it, and the software, the drivers and all of that, and the game you're using and everything has to also kind of support it or at least benefit from it. NVIDIA uses like a whitelisting feature for this. Now, the problem is that the 20 and 16 series cards were never updated to support resizable bar. It was 30 series and up that the 30 series didn't launch with resize bar support, but it was added in later. And then, again, moving on from there. But the 20 and 16 series didn't get it. The problem is this is not an official thing, and so because the BIOS needs to support it, I believe this is a mod that will it'll mod the UEFI driver, which I think can be potentially, I don't know, as mods go, this one could potentially cause issues. I wouldn't necessarily rush out and do this because the thing is, honestly, many games don't benefit performance-wise from resizable bar. Some do and some don't. Some actually can lose performance at times from resizable bar, and oftentimes the performance difference isn't massive. There are games where it is pretty large, but more commonly, it's a fairly small difference, at least on NVIDIA and AMD hardware. Intel pretty much requires it to work properly. So I would say personally, I probably wouldn't start modding the UEFI to try to get this in there, but if you want to play around with it as a project, maybe it could be something fun to look into. But anyway, another big headline is DirectX 12 Work Graphs officially being out. And what is this? So this is a DX12 update, obviously. Now, what is the purpose of this? The goal would be to eliminate CPU bottlenecks. Now, this, honestly, the exact details for how exactly all of this works is a little bit over my head when it comes to, software development and all of that. But the best as I understand it is that the goal is, so oftentimes a GPU has to wait for the CPU to tell it what to do. So the GPU does things, but kind of it gets scheduled to do things by the CPU. So it has to wait for the CPU to tell it what to do next. And the goal of the work graphs seems to be to allow the CPU to maybe generate like a list of upcoming things to do, and then the GPU can just decide to move on to the next one after finishing one without having to double check with the CPU that that's okay, right? So after finishing each thing, it doesn't have to go back and ask the CPU again. So I think the goal, as I understand it, is to make the GPU able to make more of the decisions and just move on to the next thing independently of the CPU, rather than having to ask the CPU constantly. And there's some graphs kind of showing the difference here and whatnot. I believe there's some overhead for running it though, so it won't be an across-the-board performance improvement in all cases. I think it would depend on if the way the game would be running without work graphs, if the the performance you lose by not having work graphs is made up for, is large enough that work graphs, the overhead from doing the work graph, more than makes up for it. Do you see what I'm saying, right? So I think it will be situationally an improvement to performance. But I am all for trying to reduce CPU bottlenecks because those can get extremely frustrating. There's a lot of games that are painfully CPU limited, and the problem is as a gamer, when you're GPU limited, you can do things like lower the rendering resolution, use upscaling, turn down graphics settings. But when you're CPU limited, a lot of times games don't offer a lot of, things you can do to manage the CPU limit, and you're just kind of stuck with bad performance if you're CPU limited, which is kind of frustrating. Moving on to another topic. So in the OLED monitor space, I've said before, this seems like the year that OLED monitors are not necessarily becoming absolutely mainstream. They're still definitely high end, but they're becoming available in more mainstream form factors. Like you can get 4K 32-inch screens now instead of having to get 42-inch or 48-inch screens. We're also going to get higher refresh rates and high refresh rate 1440p monitors coming down to like the 27-inch line. So this looks like a year where OLED monitors are really taking a big step into being at least more mainstream in the high end of gaming monitors. And we've seen various OLED monitor manufacturers extending their warranties out to 3 years. because the downside to OLED, it has so many upsides, but the major downside is still it is more prone to burn-in risk than other monitor types. So it's nice to see even more monitor manufacturers jumping on the extended warranty bandwagon. So it's looking like Gigabyte is extending their Aorus QD OLED monitor warranty out to 3 years, which kind of is joining a trend where MSI and Asus have already done the same. Although I think one of those is only 2 years on certain models and 3 years on others. I forget which one it was. I reported that in some other video. Now, let's get into some PC game software news. So Avatar Frontiers of Pandora was one of the first games to get the better implementation of FSR3 that, had better VRR support and all of that. But honestly, it had some issues. Mainly the HUD elements would update at half refresh rate, which is totally understandable, but there were places in the game where the HUD elements would be huge with a large, kind of fading out background to them, and that whole chunk of your screen, including the mostly transparent background, would be updating at half refresh rate because they wouldn't be generating the frames, which is understandable to avoid ghosting issues on the HUD elements. But the problem is then it makes a lot of the screen look kind of weird. So it's looking like the game's been updated to try to improve that. However, I have not had a chance to go hands-on with it yet myself to check how well it has fixed that. Now, there's other updates to the game as well, but just bringing that to your attention, if you had stopped using FSR3 in the game because that was bothering you, maybe give it another shot if you're still playing the game and see if maybe now it's more up to your liking. Speaking of FSR3, the game I keep seeing comments about is, when will Cyberpunk get its FSR3 update? It was on a list as having stated that they were working on it. Well, I keep trying to check in on this every time they get an update, but I'm a little bit concerned now because I'm seeing a headline that CD Projekt Red is done with Cyberpunk 2077, but minor future updates aren't ruled out. Well, that's a little bit concerning if they mean so hopefully they just mean updating game features, actually changing features and content in the game, and hopefully they're not talking about they're done updating the technology of the game. Because FSR3 is not in the game yet, and they said it was coming. So this is, so I'm really hoping this is not a sign that FSR3 isn't actually coming to Cyberpunk. I'm hoping we get that, because again, like I said, they said it was coming. Now, hopefully we get a whole bunch more information about upcoming games at the Summer Game Fest, and we do now have it locked down to a June date, with tickets going on sale in May. The official announcement is Friday, June 7th. So anyway, take a look at that. Now, in the other PC gaming news, I'm seeing that Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut will be launching on PC, and we not only have that confirmed, we have a release date of May 16th. And not only that, it's confirmed it will have FSR3, which does include the frame generation, not just upscaling, and DLSS 3, frame generation and upscaling, and XeSS upscaling support, which is awesome. And when you see that all those things are being included in a PlayStation port to PC, you instantly think, is it Nixie's handling the port? And that is the case. So they are not only going to be delivering us the upcoming port of Horizon Forbidden West, but it looks like they're also then shortly afterwards following it up with Ghosts of Tsushima. Hopefully they can handle both of those things, at the same time of good quality and all of that. But as PlayStation ports to PC go, Nixie's, occasionally there's little minor imperfections when a game launches, they definitely have a good track record of delivering on a lot of the PC feature set you want to see, like the ultra-wide support, which they're confirming for here as well. Again, all the different upscalers, even support up to 48:9 aspect ratios. Crazy. So cool stuff. I'm excited to see that. I know this is one of the games that a lot of people have been wanting to see on PC. So cool to see that that's coming. Another PC port a lot of people have been looking for is Final Fantasy XVI. And we are finally getting a little more words on that, saying that it's in the final stages of optimization. A PC demo is incoming. and the requirements would be fairly high. So it looks like they're currently trying to optimize it to get the requirements as low as possible and to figure out where the requirements are going to be. So we don't have system requirements yet. Definitely expect me to cover that once they're available. Same thing with Ghosts of Tsushima. I haven't seen any system requirements yet. I will plan on covering those once they're available. But yeah, it's looking like the quote here about Final Fantasy is, in terms of where we are in development currently, we are trying to figure out the final stages of optimization right now. When we can release the PC version might be dependent on that. The system requirements and specifications for PC that players will need, so we're trying to figure that out. Naturally, the PC specifications are looking to be somewhat high. So basically they're saying the game's not going to come out on PC until they've figured out how well they can optimize it and sort out system requirements, and that's what they're currently working on. In other PlayStation to PC port news, we're getting rumors that The Last of Us Part 2 remastered for PC might be announced soon, but this one is not yet official, so I'm not going to dwell on that, just saying word on the street is it should be coming soon. Now, in more maybe PC game update news, we're seeing that PUBG Battlegrounds still feels weird to me that it got updated to PUBG Battlegrounds when that should be Battlegrounds, right? So it's Battlegrounds, whatever. That's old news to complain about. Anyway, they're going to be switching to Unreal Engine 5. So upgrading to Unreal Engine 5 will also apparently be allowing them to move to destructible maps. So PUBG still has a lot of concurrent players on Steam. So despite having been out for a while now, still very popular. And again, moving to Unreal Engine 5. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like. What performance will look like. You know, are they moving into any of the new lighting systems, nanite, anything like that? It'll be cool to track. In mod news, Resident Evil 2 Remake has gotten a fully functional fixed camera mod now. So you could play it with the fixed camera angles more like the original Resident Evil 2, which sounds pretty cool to me. Haven't had a chance to check that out yet, but thought I'd at least throw that out there in the news video in case you're interested. And we are seeing news that some veterans from big AAA gaming studios have founded a couple new studios, Giant Skull and Empty Vessel. So it's looking like both of them are starting development on games using Unreal Engine 5. Speaking of Unreal Engine 5, it's looking like Giant Skull has been founded by like a former game director of God of War 3, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So that's a pretty big deal. And then it's looking like Empty Vessel is founded by, where are we getting people from? So Empty Vessel is spearheaded by CEO and game director Emmanuel Palilich, and CEO and general manager Garrett Young, both of whom worked at id Software on Doom. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. Again, both seem to be working on things about projects using Unreal Engine 5. And then the last thing I'll leave us with is some Switch 2 rumors. So to be clear, rumors. It's looking like there are reports that most Switch 2 games will use DLSS upscaling. That will be very interesting if it's true. For one thing, a lot of Nintendo games right now don't have very good anti-aliasing. So DLSS could just hopefully improve their anti-aliasing. But not only that, if you have a not super powerful machine, upscaling can be a great way to boost performance, and DLSS upscaling would have image quality advantages over other consoles, which would be really cool to see. So I'm really interested in if this does end up being the case. Seeing a handheld system with DLSS upscaling, I'd just be really cool what that looks like. Because I've got to say, a lot of times on my Steam Deck, the performance isn't quite there. I might want to use upscaling, but even quality level upscaling with like FSR2, when you're only starting with 800p resolution, you can lose a lot of image quality. So I'd be curious what DLSS would look like at those same types of resolutions. And see how that's able to resolve. That would be interesting. Anyway, don't forget to check out Jawa. In the video description, again, I can get you $10 off your first purchase, and a huge thank you to channel members who've clicked the join button to directly support the channel financially. Huge thank you. I know not everybody's in a financial position to do that, and that is totally fine. But if you do, you can get little member badges in the comment section. It's easier for me to find your comments and reply, and get early access to some of my videos, some member exclusive behind the scenes stuff, and things like that. And just huge thank you to viewers, commenters, subscribers, everybody. And I hope everyone has an excellent day.